What's going on? You listen to King Cam and Ujumbe podcast and Ujumbe Means Message. And today's message is Back to the Basics, part three. Part three. This is we're going to the African History 101 series using this book, Black Man of the Nile and His Family by Dr.Ben. Okay, check it out. I encourage you to read it on your own. This is just kind of anchoring our conversation because if you guys know me, I can kind of go left field and don't come back. So, but thank you guys for listening. I just had a pretty interesting day at school, and so we're in the process of we're ending the 6 weeks, so we're dealing with that, and I'm also still working with new teachers, and I'm a department chair, so I gotta work with everybody now. So back to the basics, part three, we're looking at chapter 4, okay? Chapters 1 through 3, Dr. Ben deals with the phenotype and what they look like according to science and, according to science. So we're going to bypass that. Basically, he's very thorough when it comes out of that. But chapter 4, if anybody's familiar with this book, chapter 4 is the lengthiest chapter out the whole book. It goes from page 114 to 250. That is a massive chunk of information. So what we're going to do is, slowly, gradually go through. We're not going to go through the whole chapter today. Oh, no, we're not doing that. But we are going to have this conversation, right? So the title of the chapter is Another Look at Nubia, Meroe, Egypt, Ethiopia, and so on. So he, according to him, of course, in chapter 4, page 114, says Nubia, the lands of the south of Egypt, were inhabited by less civilized people who were good soldiers. They were rich in gold, good quality stone, hardwood, and large cattle. They formed the gateway to Central Africa, whence came ivory, strange animals, and pygmies, and so on. So this is the above quotation taken from the Encyclopedia of Egyptian Civilization under the heading of Nubia. And of course, you know that the Encyclopedia of Egyptian Civilization was not written by people of African descent. It was actually the Europeans. And so he points out the fact that a lot of scholarship, a lot of scholarly work during at that time, if you want to call that scholarly work, it was ran by Europeans and a lot of racism. And so the term pygmy was and is a derogatory term. They were called the Batwa people and some other names that I can't really recall. But the truth of the matter is Europe wanted to impose their view on how they saw Egypt and how the world should see Egypt. See what I'm saying? So how did they do that? They not only used the words as a weapon, but also they tried to divide or separate Egypt from the rest of Africa by carving out a line around the second cataract. By doing that, it separated Egypt from Nubia and ultimately the rest of Africa. But the thing is, Kemet and Nubia was in a close relationship. They was always trading. They was always working together. And so they always interacted with each other. So he mentioned how Europe tried to develop a line of demarcation in page 115. That's what it's called. So along the second cataract. But he also mentioned that how depends on where you are in the ancient world in Africa, Kemet may have different names like Tamari, Tanisi, or even Kemet, that kind of thing. So, so it's not just one name. They actually depends on what part of the Nile you was on, you called it different things. But unfortunately, the scholarship, the last 200 years, according to Dr. Ben, the last 200 years was ran by people who were racist and people who if they could not say that they was part of this situation, they say the Africans certainly weren't. Now, but even though they tried to make that line of demarcation, even though they tried to separate Nubia from Kemet, Dr.Ben mentioned that in the inscriptions on Uni on page 118, that they were trading. They was getting wood from Uganda. You know, they was getting wood from the deep south, you know? And so you can't simply divide the land like that. You can't just okay, let me see. There you go. No, it's an organic situation. People were trading, people were sharing, not just goods and tangible materials, but ideas. Okay, you can't separate that. And so they got the material from Uganda and many others to build what? Abydos, the temples of Karnak or Waset and so on, the Ibn Isut in many places. So they displayed the concept what he called high culture. And Dr.Ben, he many times he mentions the difference between being a civilization and high culture. Civilization just means you have a language, norms, and expectations, and so on. But high culture means these people of Africa, Kemet, not just Kemet, but Congo, Uganda, Tanzania, many others had a high culture. What do you mean by that? They mastered the arts and sciences they've been masters of it for eons. Okay, mastering it so much to where they're able to pass it down from one generation to the other. That's the thing. That's high culture. And that's really what I'm trying to do for our young people here is to not just get an education and get a piece of paper, but to have that high culture to where you can either teach this class or you can teach other people how to do the same or make the world around you better. So that's what we mean, what he means by high culture. It's not just civilization saying that I'm civilized because I know words. No, you have a high culture. Can you use those words to bring forth change and empower, right? Now, on page 124, I'm skipping, I know I am. Page 124, he goes into the Neters or the Neteru, okay, the different deities. He starts to name them. And then on page 130, he goes from that to a calendar. Yeah, a calendar. What do you mean by that? Everybody deals with a calendar. Anybody talks about calendars. Every civilization culture has a calendar, but this calendar was different. This calendar had 3 seasons. That's what caught my attention. It had 3 seasons, not 4. Okay, according to Dr.Ben, is 3 seasons, not 4. What are those? It was the Aket, the season and the inundation, which I'm certain that's the rainy season, right? The Peret, springtime, and the Sanu. 3. Okay, that's pretty interesting. And this goes long before the Greco-Roman calendar. But guess what? There was another calendar that was used that was based more off solar, but there was a stellar calendar that came from, say, Ethiopia, that they looked at the stars in the sky, and that's how they gauged the seasons. I think the name escapes me. I think it's he wrote the book, the Introduction to African Civilization. I think it's named Dr. John, I believe. John Jackson. There it is. John Jackson. So he talked about the stellar calendar that's over 10,000 years old. And, so the African people as a culture, as a high culture, has been doing this for a long time. Now, Dr.Ben goes on into the chapter by saying how the Greco-Roman world, the Europeans tried to shave off a couple of thousand years. That's not right, but that's what he does. That's what they do. Why? Because they were trying to shave off that time to either belittle the advancement of the African people or just to say everybody got here at the same time. That's not so. I had to, mention to my to some world history students that even though they, according to the curriculum, they mentioned the Nile River and the Indus River and the Yangtze, or the Yellow River in China, at the same time, does not mean those civilizations started at the same time. Okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. But he mentions that how they tried to shave off time, while they're shaving off time on one end, on the other side they're still digging, and they find more knowledge, of us as a people. Now, in the middle of, well, not the middle of the chapter, but in the 130s, 136, he goes into chronological order as to how and when and where. He goes into the order of the prehistoric era. Now, the prehistoric era is pretty interesting because this was the age before the pharaohs. I mentioned that in the in my podcast, The Kings Before the Pharaohs, the Shimshu Haru, or the followers of Horus. They did not have a name, but they had a title. It was how many? It was between 40 and 42 of them. It was there was their title. So the concept of Haru was long before the Pharaonic age. So, but the thing is, these were individuals that ruled that area eons long before the first king of Egypt. And chances are they did come from, according to the information, came from the south. They did, like, they came from up south, right? So then he goes into the Old Kingdom and the Hyksos and so on. But there was four golden ages. There's, of course, there's ebbs and flows and rises and falls and things like that. But he touches on that. But then he gives you nice little map for my visual learners. Okay, nice little map, and starting from the south, right, and going all the way up. That's 4,100 some odd miles. You can fit the United States into that space and still have room. That's how large this space is. Okay, all the way down from the Bakongo, Tanzania to Ethiopia, all the way up. Some of my ancient ancestors came from Tanzania. So much love to my people that speak Swahili. I'm still learning, so stay tuned for that. I know y'all laughing at me a little bit. So, but he goes into further detail as far as the pharaonic ages, Nermer or Mene or Sultanet, the very first king of Egypt, who combined Nubia and Kush. That is a big deal. What people do not understand, for a person to come and unite a group of people of any race, any time, that's a big deal. So when you see, I don't have the illustration here, but when you see in the Meta Nature, the two individuals with ropes tying a shim, or the king's name, that means he's the king of the north and south when they tie it together like that. So hopefully I may be able to put that on here on it, as far as like a little picture. But that's a big deal. But he goes in and names these people. These kings and queens are part of what they would call the Hall of Records. The Hall of Records is, goodness, that spans for thousands of years. And if the king or queen is a recognized king or queen of Kemet, their name would be put on there. Foreigners, Mzungus, were not on there. I said what I said. So, but it's cool because he not only has their names as far as in the Meta Nature, but he has it phonetically spelled out. So that's pretty cool. But
students at this time, everyone should be back in class. Students at this time, everyone should be back in class. Thank you and have a great night.
So it goes on from the very beginning. Of course, there are names that you look, the names get a little bit more grand and more elaborate too, from like, Seti or Menes to Ursa, Rasa, Tipper, very long names. But still, just, these people, some pharaohs had long names, some had short names, but the respect level and was there. And some of them had those names and titles added because certain accomplishments were made during their reign. Okay. So just keep that in mind. But in the middle of the chapter, the history and the dates and names go from page 136 all the way to 165. That whole section deals with the pre-pharaonic age, all the way up until probably modern. Let me see, all the way up until the 1950s. So he goes in, he doesn't go into detail, but he does name names and give dates so we can do our own research. That's the idea. I'm not, of course, like I said before, I'm not going to read the book to you, but we're doing a brief overview. I encourage you guys to go read, lock it in. Like I tell people, I hope, this helps. I hope, sharing what little I know is helpful, but we're going to stop here because it goes into further into the high culture, talking about we came from the foothills of the mountains of the moon where God dwells. So that is deep south. That is Mount Kilimanjaro and other places. But we're going to talk about that next time. All right. Listen to King Cam and Ujumbe's podcast, and Ujumbe means message. And today's message is back to the basics. Another look at Nubia, Meroe, Ethiopia, and all of them. Right. Thank you for listening. Hopefully the Swahili version of this will be posted in a few days. I got to practice on that a little bit, but thank you guys for tuning in, and talk to you later.